And we're live. Okay. Hello, book lovers, and welcome to A Mighty Blaze's Frontliner interview. A special hello to everyone who identifies as a member of Team Jamie or Team Frank, anyone who's maybe named their child Claire or Brianna or Jamie or even Dougal, anyone whose favorite color is plaid or dreams about running away to the Scottish Highlands, and most of all, welcome and hello to everyone who claims today's guest as their favorite author. We're very, very happy that you're here. So my name is Kimberly Hensle Lowrance, and I'm the co-host of A Mighty Blaze's Authors Love Bookstore program, which broadcasts on Wednesdays. But from time to time, I get to sit in the host seat here for Frontliner. And today's incredibly special for me. It's kind of a pinch me moment. Well, it's not kind of, actually. It's definitely. When I joined the Blaze back in 2020, I created a dream interview list, and today's author has been at the top of that list. I think, actually, Diana, you were the first person I put on the list. And yeah, so I'm going to introduce you, even though you need no introduction. Today's guest is Diana Gabaldon. Welcome, Diana.
Hi, nice to see you all. Thanks for having me.
So if you'll indulge me, Diana, I'm going to share your bio, even though I know our audience already knows who you are. But Diana Gabaldon is the author of the award-winning author of the #1 New York Times bestselling Outlander novels. I actually have them all on a stack right here. But Outlander came out in 1991. This is what started it all. And then the most recent book, this is my weight training. Yes. Go Tell the Bees That I Am Gone came out in 2021. There are 9 books in the main series. There are also numerous related books, both fiction and nonfiction, including the Lord John Gray books. The Washington Post calls the Outlander novels vast and sweeping. Publishers Weekly calls them compulsively readable.
They better be both.
They are both. And also, in addition to these wonderful books, we have this television series that fans are devoted to. Episode 2 of season 7 dropped today. If you haven't yet watched it, it's so good. Please go check it out. So in addition to fiction, Diana, you are a scientist and you hold degrees in zoology, marine biology, and a PhD in quantitative behavioral ecology. So we actually should call you Dr. Gabaldon.
If you want to. Yeah.
And you have an honorary degree of doctorate of humane letters. All of those.
I've got 2 of those, actually.
2 of those. All right. Well, you're joining us today from Arizona. Is that right?
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
Excellent. So to our audience, we're going to open it up for some audience questions. So please drop them in the comments below, and we'll get to as many as we can later on. Please know we endeavor to be a spoiler-free zone. So just be mindful, though, that we may talk about things that, if you are not caught up in the books, that you might not yet know about. So just a heads up. Okay. Questions. Diana, when I was researching for today, I came across a statistic that said you have sold 50 million copies of your books worldwide.
Well, as far as we can approximate, yeah. I mean, they keep on selling, so it's not like we have a counter or anything. It's just, I have 2 agents, one for U.S. rights and film rights, and the other gentleman takes care of my foreign rights. So every single publisher has their own contract, their own set of royalty statements. So I have to call up my foreign rights agent and say, well, what's your best estimate of how many books we've sold in the last 5 years and so forth. So yes, that's, it's an estimate, not a direct count, but it's pretty darn close.
It's a remarkable achievement when you consider that most books sell only a couple thousand copies in their lifetime, and the fact that
that's very terrible.
It is terrible, and it's a testament to what you've created here. And I wonder, do you ever meet people who don't know what Outlander is or have never read your book? And I wonder, if you meet them, how do you describe what you've created?
Well, I mean, it kind of depends on the circumstances. If it's just, somebody you're passing time in a waiting room or something, and they're saying, oh, what do you do for a living? I say, I'm a writer. And sometimes they just leave it there. Though usually they'll say, what do you write? And then it gets more complicated because, as my own beloved first editor used to say to me, these have to be word of mouth books because they're too weird to describe to anyone, which is totally true. So, but it's gotten easier since the show, because now I can say, oh, are you familiar with a TV show called Outlander? And either they are are, and they go, or they're not, but they say, oh, well, I've heard of that. Yes, I say, well, I wrote the books that show is based on, and in either way, they're impressed.
I love that you mentioned word of mouth, because that's actually
Mhm.
how I came to Outlander. Is one of my good friends, when she heard that I hadn't read the book, was very disappointed in me, first of all, and then drove to my home with her copy of Outlander and said, "You're going to read this now." And
Well, now that's a good friend.
that's a good friend. Is a very good friend. And then a related part of
Mhm.
that is the volume of people in my life who love your books. I was mentioning this to you before we came live. So many people. And the one that's really striking to me is my mother-in-law, because
Oh,
she and I do not read the same books,
oh
but
yeah,
our, in a Venn diagram, right in the middle, overlapping
that's the
our
intersection
reading
there.
habits, there you sit. Oh, just you, nobody else. And I think there's something really extraordinary
Mhm,
about the way you have generations of people who read
mhm,
your books,
mhm.
mothers and daughters and mothers-in-laws and daughters-in-law. And did you expect that? Is that something that you, when you sat down to write that first book, like, oh, someday I will impact generations of a family and friends will share books and meet each other online and I'll have a phenomenon? Like, at
No.
what point? No.
Well, for one thing, the internet didn't exist when I started writing these books, so that side of it was completely unknown. No, I didn't have anything in mind when I started except to learn how to write a novel, because I'd known since I was 8 years old that I was supposed to be a novelist. I just didn't know how. And so finally, I turned 35, and I said, well, Mozart was dead at 36. If you want to write a novel, maybe you better start.
Exactly.
And I said, well, up to this point, I had done a lot of large projects in my life, from computer programming to scholarly publishing. I founded and ran a scholarly journal magazine called Science Software Quarterly, which I ran for 8 years. And then me and the university sold it to I think John Wiley and Sons has become extinct now, but they used to be a big science publisher. Anyway, we sold it to them. That was the last of that. And I've written, comic books and so forth. The point here is that no matter what I was writing, I didn't look for a book about how to write this.
Yep.
I just read a lot of what I was wanting to write, and then I wrote it. And so it came back. Because, it's words on the page. You can change them. If you write something and it isn't quite right, fine. You don't have to rip it out of your typewriter and go, oh, they're a rewriter because this sentence is terrible. And I know people like that. I mean, I really know people like that. I'm like,
No.
yes, this is not how you become a writer.
Well,
You put
sometimes
down
you
the
learn.
sentence and look at it.
Yeah. And sometimes we learn the most from making a mistake. And sometimes we
Yeah.
learn from writing a bad first draft.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you work in drafts, yeah, I kind of
Yes.
don't. But, yeah.
You don't, though, do you? You just write.
Yeah, well, I pick, and I fiddle constantly. I don't work with an outline. I don't work in a straight line, and I don't write drafts. What I need to start on any given day is what I call a kernel, which is a very vivid image, a line of dialogue, an emotional ambiance, sketch of music, something, anything that I can describe in words. And if I think about that, I get words that say, well, the such and such was doing this, or the sky outside was amazing. There's a crescent moon floating down through the trees, and I'm thinking, floating down through the trees, that's good. Crescent moon floating down through the trees, and I stare at it and I'm thinking, who's looking at this? Why are they having time to look at the moon? If there's something sneaking up on them that they should be paying attention to instead of looking at the moon, things like that. And so the front of my mind is fiddling with that sentence, trying to make it as clear and elegant as it can be, just in terms of the writing. The back of my mind is kicking up all these questions. What time of day is it? Where's the light falling? Is there someone in the room with me? What's making that sound? What kind of sound is it? And so, I'm always just adding little bits and fiddling and things begin to hook together. It's like playing Tetris in my head, but very slowly.
Are you aware of those questions that are being asked? Are you aware that as you're writing that your mind is asking these questions?
Well, yeah, I'm aware of it, but I'm not. It's not like I'm having a conversation with my mind. We're in this together. So, yeah, no, those are just the sort of questions that float through my mind, no matter what I'm writing on any given day. And sometimes if I'm really stuck on something, I will stop, and think consciously about something. And the best question is, where is the light falling? If it's coming in from the side, and it's then what color is the light? Is it daylight? Is it getting to be evening? Is it dark outside and I'm seeing street lights? Something like that. Or, if I'm looking at someone's face, I see the light touching his or her face, and then I can describe that face and say that, the light touched his face with, etc. Or, he looked like a skull with the darkness of his brows and the nose against the dim light, and something like that. So anything that causes words to happen, basically. And then I play with those words.
How much are you thinking about your writing when you're not writing? Like when you're walking the dog or washing the dishes, are you reflecting upon a character or a scene that you wrote? Is the story sort of percolating in your mind while you're existing in another space? Or do you only kind of focus on it when you're sitting down at your desk?
Oh, no, I think, well, I mean, I don't turn it off
Right.
that way. Now sometimes I am absorbed in something else and it's nowhere near my consciousness. Other times, I'm just sort of doing something else, but something floats in. I may be reading an exciting book and I want to go on reading it and so forth, but something in it suddenly triggers, a little image for me. And I'm thinking, oh, that might be, a kernel crystal for me. And so, I will tuck that into a little brain space. What I do is I kind of crystallize those kinds of images. I will have an image, and it may not be an image of any real thing, but it might be a shape. But once I have done that, I won't forget it. And when I sit down at my computer that night or whenever, I can kind of unpack that. It's like dropping those Japanese things into boiling water and you get a towel in the shape of Godzilla.
Yes, I know. I used to have those with my kids when they were little.
Yes, yes.
Exactly. I understand.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like your writing process is both patient and open.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, people seem, well, I can't say this is widespread, but I see it fairly often. People are inclined to blame themselves, if their writing is not going well. I'm thinking, why would you do that? I mean, writing is hard enough. Why would you should be on the same side with yourself. You're both in this together.
Oh, I like that. You should be on the same side with yourself for everything, not just writing, but yeah.
Oh, exactly so. Yeah. But, don't waste time beating yourself up. People are, so busy going, oh, I'll never be a writer. This is terrible. I can't stand this. They're not even looking at the page. They're not trying. You write stuff by writing stuff. That's all there is to it. And this seems to escape a lot of people.
Yeah.
They seem to think, oh, I have to be in the right frame of mind. I must have the right, studio set up. How can I write? My family is driving me crazy. Well, now that's a practical problem,
yes.
But there are answers to it.
Well, you wrote Outlander when you had 3 children under the age of 6. Is that correct?
I did, and 2 full-time jobs. Well, it was the 2 full-time jobs that actually helped because they gave me an excuse to be up late at night. My husband was not saying, well, why don't you come to bed? I said, oh, I can't come to bed. I have to deliver this article tomorrow or I won't get paid. And so while I was up there writing, I think I have a very benign sort of ADHD in that I can and I do think of a number of things at once. And it's hard for me to find a subject that is sufficiently absorbing that is using like 90% of my mind and doing some of these other distractions aside. But that works with writing multiple projects. Back in the day, I was a university professor. I had to be writing, grant proposals and reports and scholarly articles and stuff like that. And I also wrote nearly full-time for the computer press, writing software reviews and things like that. So I would always have a little stack of projects for Byte or InfoWorld on my desk. And so I would start, say, on a grant proposal, which is the most worst writing ever.
It is.
So dull. Yeah. Yeah. So I could only get, 2/3 of the way down the page.
Yeah.
And get 2/3 of the way down the page on anything, and then it stops. And you sit there, now what? Yeah. So I realized fairly early on that if I wrote 2/3 of the page of the grant proposal and it stuck, I would just leave it right there and open a new window and start with the newest thing on the software review pile. I would work on that. When it stuck, I would go back and look at the grant proposal and go, no, it's not happening. This one's not happening. Okay, open another window and work on a scene from the novel. And so I would just keep cycling through my open projects, and it kept me from, ever giving up or going away because I had something new to switch to.
A lot of kindness then you're giving yourself in your writing, sort of like an out of the gate respect that you're going to need to move from project to project, and that will sustain your creativity and your success.
Yeah, well, it's just as always. I mean, Yes, I run into a lot of people here who are kind of, holding themselves accountable and, punishing themselves
Yeah.
for not doing things right. Why would you do that? No. You have this thing you want to do. Let's go ahead and do it. If I figure out how it suits you to do that, there isn't any, immorality to what you're doing. You don't have to make excuses. This is what you're doing. That's all.
Well, I definitely have more writing questions for you that we're going to get to later on. But
Absolutely.
I listened to a podcast you did recently, the I Love Scotland podcast, and
Oh,
it seemed like you were hedging your bets on the Outlander series ending with book 10. It seemed like you were kind of like, maybe, maybe not. And, I almost like dropped my tea when I read that. So I just wondered, can you speak to that?
mhm.
Or is it another one, or you're just giving yourself space to do what you need to do?
Well, it's more that I know myself. I wrote Outlander for practice. I was never intending to show it to anyone. I wasn't going to tell anyone what I was doing, but things happened, and I got a 3-book contract. And I said, "All right, so I'll write 3 books." Anyway, I got toward the end of the 3rd book, and I realized that there was still more to this story. So I called up and told my agent that. And he said, "Well, they'll be happy to hear that." And so, another 3-book contract. Anyway, the thing is that I assumed Outlander was going to be this one single practice novel, and it does stand alone by itself. It would be fine if I had stopped there, but I didn't. There's more of the
Thank
story.
goodness.
But the thing is, I do not plan the books out ahead of time. I
Mm.
don't. It would not be fun. I don't work with an outline. I can't think of anything more deadly. But this is a matter of how your own brain works. I know people who cannot work without outlines. It's just that their brain is much more under control than mine is.
Okay.
But you work with what you have. You don't. This is why I never have and never will read a how to write book by someone else, because it isn't how to write. It's how this person writes,
Exactly.
which is probably nothing like the way I write. So I love to talk to other writers, and hear all about their methods and their process and so forth. And often I'm going, wow, I can never do that. But they're likewise looking at me and going, oh my God.
Are you're closer to the end of telling Jamie and Claire's story though than you are.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
have you been thinking about that? Is that on your mind? Are you allowing yourself, because I would imagine there's a sort of sadness to come to the end.
Well, yeah, there would be that, I suppose. But as I tell people, owing to the way that I write, all of the books, they have very coherent plots and all that.
Yes,
But
I
there are
know.
spaces within the plots. There's spots where, we're skipping several months, because it's like
Yes.
winter on the ridge,
Right.
what's happening, and so forth. I could at any point go back to any of those lacunae and write a novella about what was happening then. So, I'm not giving up Jamie and Claire. I'm not saying goodbye to them.
Fabulous.
I'm not burying them in a deep pit. They're always there if I need them.
Yes,
Yeah, and I just don't understand this allowing yourself to do stuff. Who the heck is stopping you?
True.
You know?
It's true. You can do whatever you want.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Everyone,
Yeah.
all writers can.
Yeah. So anyway, I tell people that I intend book 10 to be the final volume because I'm 71. I don't know how long I'm going to last, and it would be nice to bring it to a tidy, convenient closure and so forth. But if that's not how it works out, that's not how it works out. So we'll just have to see.
Well, I love that you're excited about the idea, or in the idea of more novellas are sort of percolating, because those are really, they're incredibly fun to read, to dip back
I enjoy those a lot. Yeah,
Yeah,
those are very fun.
So there was a great review about bees in the Washington Post, and the reviewer said, one of the many things that you do superbly is show how great events aren't history to those who live through them, but simply everyday life, with children to be fed, clothes to be mended, the dead to be buried. I loved that line. I really thought it speaks very much to your novels. Also kind of the space we're living in now. Yeah. People may look back at this and think, you were in this momentous time with the pandemic and everything.
Yeah, no, they totally will.
Yeah.
I just hope it's not more memorable than it already is.
Is that something you think about when you're writing the books? Are you conscious, because your characters do live through very important events in history? Are you aware? Are you thinking about that? How can I take this event that lives in history as a forming America, for example, the Revolutionary War, and how can I humanize it? Is that a conscious thought in your mind when you sit down to write, or just kind of a happy
Oh,
byproduct of the work?
oh no, no, that's very conscious. This is one of the perks of writing historical fiction is you don't have to start from a blank page to make it all up. There is a lot of stuff out there. You are needing to, yeah, I guess humanize it would be a good word, but you need to create a sense of reality to history, and not everybody's good at that. But you do that by what I call underpainting, which means to provide little tiny bits of sensory detail
Yes.
throughout everything you write. And then also there's the cascade of questions. You know, if you have a good story, from the first line, your reader should be saying, "And then what happened?" And then you provide that answer with a little hook, and they want to know, "And then what happened?"
What happened?
You know, so she was sipping her tea when the doorbell rang. We want to know who was on the other side of the door. Okay, is she going to answer the door? In which case we will find a person and we will want to know who is this. She may instead be startled, drop her teacup, jump up, and rush out the back door. We're thinking, well, where is she going? Who is at the front door? And you get the reader following this little cascade of questions. Every paragraph, other than just straight action, should include a question like that. People don't notice that they're there, but they want them answered, and that's what keeps them going down the page.
That's true. One of the things about your books, well, let me rephrase it. I've been thinking a lot about why are these books so addictive, and why do so many people in my life read them, and millions of people around the world. And obviously we'll say that people love Jamie and Claire's love story. It's epic and fabulous and something we aspire to. I would say that I personally adore Claire. I just find her so inspiring and resilient and strong. And of course, they're beautifully written. We go through history, but I think there's something else, and I wondered what you thought about this. Your characters suffer. They have bad things happen to these people we love so much, right? There's sexual and physical assault. There's loss and grief. There's war. There's shipwrecks. There's kidnappings. There's many things that happen to these people. And of course, from a narrative perspective, you got to have stuff happening so people are hooked.
Yes, you do.
But what you also do is you show the impact of that trauma on these characters. Yeah. You show what happens and their healing. So as a reader, we know that something very bad happens to Jamie in book 1, for example, but we also know that he is still thinking about it and dealing with it in book 9. And that is so human and real. And I imagine it shifts readers' perspective about healing and about trauma, and it makes them heal themselves or think about bad things they have gone through and get strength. And I imagine it also gives them empathy to people who are also going through bad times. And I think that that's something that draws them to your books. What do you think of this theory? Is this a little, am I off?
Oh, yes. Oh, no, that's totally right on. Every reader, let's put it this way, no two people are ever reading the same book, because your response to a book is going to be based on who you are. How old are you? Are you a male? Are you a female? Are you something else? What is your life like? What is your brain like? What is your family relations like? People with a horrible family are going to see the Frasers in a different light. That may be envious, or it may be going, nobody lives that way, kind of thing. But either way, you're going to feel the book as a reflection of yourself, and vice versa. The book will change you while you're reading it, and so forth. And so, I occasionally will have people come and say, "Oh, well, I've loved all of your books. Then I hit this one, and I thought, well, this is really slow. I'm not going to read this," and so forth. And I said, well, tell you what, come back and read it again in 5 years, and I bet you will enjoy it then, because you will be the right sort of age to appreciate what's happening in this book.
Sure.
But people are quite different in their responses, and their education, their prejudice, their expectations all come into play when they're reading a book, and consequently their reaction to it will be different. If you're in a traumatized state of mind when you read one of my books, you may find it very reassuring. And many people have written to me to say so. They say, my life was just falling apart. And then I read this and I was thinking, well, all this stuff is happening to your characters. And yet they are, they're not lying down and giving up. Well, I'm not going to do that either.
What do you do when you get those emails? I mean, that must be an incredible sense of responsibility you feel toward the readers who take the time to write you. Is that inspiring? Is that reassuring? How do you process that?
Well, I'm always very moved by them. And, if humanly possible, I will write back to them. I get maybe 200 to 300 emails a day. I mean, 2/3 of it is junk, but there's another third that's not. And that comes in varying degrees of urgency and so forth. So many years ago, I engaged someone to help sort and answer fan mail and so forth. And I wrote myself the answers to the 13 most frequently asked questions that people sent me. And so the person who is looking at my email will forward on to me anything that is unique or, so heartfelt that only I could answer it, things like that. Or the people who say, my last name is Gabaldon, are you a member of my family? To which the answer is almost certainly yes. You're related to everyone named Gabaldon in the 4 states area here. But my dad was the youngest of 13 children. I literally have thousands of cousins.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. Anyway, so I always write back to family because they say, where do you come from in the family line? I'll say my grandparents were so and so and so and so. My dad was born in Berlin. Where do your people come from? And we can usually find the connection. But that's low impact kind of correspondence. And the others are people who, if they're asking when is the next book coming out, well, there's a canned answer for that rather than my taking hours a day to retype it multiple times to the same people. So we handle things as expeditiously but as thoughtfully as we can. The people looking at my email will always pass on to me anything that is a personal story or has a unique question, and I will answer those. I may be very slow about it because there's an awful lot of stuff to do, but if you get one of those answers, I wrote it, and that is exactly what I would tell you if we were face to face.
Is the number one question that people ask what's going to happen in book 10, or what's the Jamie ghost question? Is it related to the ghost? I would imagine that's
well, a lot of people want to know that, but I mean, it should be obvious, surely. But I just want to know that. No, they want to know, when is book 10 coming out?
I know.
The answer is, I have no idea.
But that's a great. I'm glad you mentioned that. You wrote a great piece on how publishing works, and so we're going to link it below. I think it's a great primer on the process of writing a book and getting it published for people who aren't in the field.
Yeah, most people don't know. Yeah,
so that's below. Okay, I want to jump back to writing. Mm-hmm. So many of us at the Mighty Blaze are novelists, and I am working on my first novel. And when I sat down, I wanted to write this book, I was really overwhelmed with the idea of writing a book, and I didn't understand how to start. And then I found something you wrote on your website. I think many people have that problem, but you've written about the way you write. You mentioned it earlier that you follow an idea, and you don't write chapter one in a straight line. Right. You don't write in a straight line. You kind of write whatever you want to write, whatever is appropriate for where you are. And I found that piece of writing, and it was like, great. Yeah, it was extremely helpful. And I want to say thank you for that.
You're very welcome. I'm happy that was a help to you.
It really was. It sort of unlocked, I think, the writing process. And I think you've said it right now too, which is you can really do it however it works for you.
Yeah. I mean, there are patterns to writing. There actually are not any rules. You can start anywhere. I do, and I don't need to start at the beginning. I start where I can see something happening. And then that sometimes leads to something else. Sometimes it doesn't. I'll find another kernel somewhere else and start writing with that in the way that I told you. And so that expands into a scene. And while that's working along, I was doing this just day before yesterday, nothing happening, but I knew that this one particular person was going to have to travel from X to Y. I said, okay, let's go there with him. So I was just working along, and the first thing that came into my mind was, he's riding horseback. What would that mean? Well, it's probably raining on him. I was thinking, okay, he's raining on him. That sounds good. So we start with, the Duke of Partlow was drenched to the skin. And I'm thinking, okay, where's he going? And what's going to happen now that it's raining and so forth? Is going to do anything about it? Anyway, that expanded into a very interesting little thing. And it also showed me what had to have happened sometime before he got on the road, which was also important, because I needed to know that. But some things you just won't find out unless you're actually hands-on and working. You cannot dope out a whole book in your head unless you're writing a very specific kind of book, and those are not usually the kind of books I want to read. But yeah,
You're also,
varies.
but you're also curious. I mean, that's what I'm
Yes.
getting from this is
Oh yeah,
you're very curious. What are you doing? Why is it raining? Where are
all
you
the time.
going?
Yeah. No, I ask questions all the time.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
such an important point for writers who are watching, but also for readers when they kind of want to
Mhm.
know about the way things are. Why is this
Mhm.
that way? Because
Mhm.
you're curious and you ask the question. Oh,
Yeah.
that's really interesting. Did that process for writing for you, the way you kind of follow the question or follow the inspiration, did that change when you wrote episodes of the television series, the adaptation, or did you follow that, or did you have to adopt a new approach?
There's a very specific procedure for writing scripts. Um, the writers' room, which consists of a
Yes.
number of writers and the showrunners and so forth, will get together at the beginning of a season, well in advance of the season. Anyway, someone goes through and breaks script, as they put it, which means they go through the book or books that they're dealing with, and they write down every significant event in the book on a little plastic magnetic thing. The room is covered with whiteboards wall to wall, and they have all these little plastic things moving in roughly chronological order according to the way they are in the book. So then they all sit there and they argue about what should be in this season, or in yeah, it's going to be in this season to start with, because there's no way they can cram in everything in a book into one season, and essentially they can get maybe 1/10 of a book into a regular season, and that's a regular season of 12 to 16 episodes. Yeah, so they have to pick and choose and be very careful, because not only do they have to get what they call tent pole segments, which are the scenes that everybody wants to see.
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
like when does Jamie meet William face to face? I
Yes,
really want to see that happen.
yes, of
That
course.
kind of thing. Of course. So of course we have to have that, but where is that going to happen? It doesn't need to happen the way it does in the book, but that has to happen, and so they have to decide, where is this going to happen, and that changes a lot as they go on. Anyway, there's someone in the back of the room who is listening to all of this conversation and writing down everything. Then the showrunners kind of go through that and trim it down and so forth. The net result is that they send me what they call a beat sheet, which is actually usually several pages, but essentially it's the flow chart for the script that I am supposed to write. It
Okay.
lays out exactly which events we need and the sequence in which roughly they should go. I can change the sequence if I see a better way of doing it, but I can't change the events. We need to include this, that, and the other. But the dialogue is entirely mine. The setting to some extent is mine. I mean, it will be set in this particular place, but if I need something like a table with whiskey and jugs and things on it, I can say that. I can have props, and I can do other kinds of things. So I have a great deal of discretion, but it's still going to follow that beat sheet. So only that material is going to be in the script, and it needs to be in roughly that form, because it'll fall into scenes that the director will need to use for his or her storyboard. So, it's a very ordered process, unlike the way I write. Mind you, I can still write that out of order. If I come to an interesting bit in the beat sheet and it suddenly triggers, a line of dialogue or a conversation, I will start writing that. And, we write with a particular software. It's called Final Draft,
Mhm.
and it is script writing software. So, well, if you put in the initial letter of your character, it will fill in the name for you. That
Oh,
kind of
wow.
stuff. Yeah, it's a pain in the neck, but to learn. But yeah, because I'm used to having total freedom of writing stuff wherever you do, and now things have to be dialogue, which means they have to be centered in the middle of the page with a character above and all this. So it's more like writing with an outline than what I do otherwise. But I still have a great deal of freedom in it. As I say, all the dialogue is mine, and I will use as much of the original book's dialogue as I can.
Yes.
But the rest of the dialogue is going to fit because it's mine too.
Book readers will identify. I know when I watch the show, I'm like, oh, I remember that line, or oh, so we love it when it's bold. There's another thing that you have on your website. We'll include the link below too. When you talk about the shape of your books, this is also something I love very much. And I ask authors when I interview them for A Mighty Blaze, I ask them sometimes about the shapes of their novels. And we'll put the link below. But you talk about how each of your books has a different shape. So, for example, Outlander shape is 3 triangles on top of one another. one of the books is shaped like a dumbbell.
That's Dragonfly and Amber. Yes.
Okay. I'd show that one, but my stack is down here.
Yeah, I know.
And but all of your books have different shapes, and we're gonna go check it out because it's really interesting. Why is it important for books to have a geometric shape, or why is it helpful to you that they have this shape? Does it help your writing? Does it help your thinking about the story you're telling?
It probably does to some extent, but basically it's just something that emerges and makes itself clear to me as I'm working. It's not that I need a shape or I'm fitting things into it. It's just that as I work, I can see the shape coming up. And I suppose knowing that gives me a sense of thoroughness. If I know this is a shape and I have this particular scene going, and I'm thinking, well, there's always several spots where I'm shuffling things around and thinking, where does this work? Because you can make a given scene fit almost anywhere just by changing the details of, time, season, whatever, etc. And others have to be in a particular sequence because of the plot and chronological time, which you have to take account of. So, I'm just looking at that sort of thing. And if I have already seen the shape of the book, then I think, oh, it fits right here, but it's just, I'm just used to thinking in geometrical terms.
Okay.
As I say, I was a scientist.
Yes.
And that's where the curiosity comes in as well. But, people think science is this very cold, orderly, lab coat kind of thing, which is totally not. And they also think that, writing or any kind of art is just this wonderful, fuzzy, colorful, happy kind of stuff, which is totally not. But the thing is, they're both two sides of the same coin, and they both depend on the same thing, which is the ability to distinguish patterns. Mm-hmm. That's it. And I always tell people that writers don't have any secrets. Anything we know how to do is right there on the page. You just have to learn how to see it. But, if you want to know how dialogue works, get a really good book that you enjoy reading because of the dialogue. And then you look carefully and see how they did that. It's not hidden.
It's true. When you like a book, it's a good strategy to ask yourself, why do I like this? What's working for me? Right?
That's exactly right.
That's a conversation, and that's how you learn. Is there an overall shape to the whole series?
I don't know yet. There probably is, but I haven't really, thought about it.
So I want to ask you a related question, which is structure. Yeah. So book readers know the Outlander is one POV, first person Claire.
Yes.
And then I actually wrote them all down. So here's every book and all different POVs. But then the second book, we get Roger's POV in third. Then in Voyager, we get Jamie's in third. Then as the books go on, we add Brianna and Ian and William and Lord John. And I wondered about, how do you decide who gets a POV? And I am going to ask a spoiler. Will we see a new POV in book 10? Sorry, I promise no spoilers, but I do need to ask.
Oh, yes, we will.
So excited.
Yeah, no, it's, it's just the book kind of reveals itself to me. I don't make a lot of these decisions a priori. They just sort of, emerge as I need them. I'll run into something and I'll think, I really don't know how I'm going to handle that. Let me go take a step back and think about it. While I'll go write something else. And while I'm doing that, the back of my mind is kicking around the first problem and thinking, well, maybe if you, no, it's not going to work. Different things. So, you just remain open to the possibilities.
And how did you come to this structure? Would we call this structure a braided narrative? Because we have so many POVs, kind of, maybe this. How did you come to this? How did you know, oh, this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to tell this story. Was it just like something that came to you, or did you consciously make that choice?
Well, like I say, I don't plan the stories out ahead of time. I had no idea. I just knew I wanted to write a novel, and it didn't really matter what kind.
Okay.
And so I was thinking, what is the easiest kind of book I can write for practice? No one's ever going to see it. It doesn't matter. What's the easiest thing I could write? And I thought, well, for me, maybe historical fiction. I was a research scientist. I had a huge library at my disposal and the whole international library system. So I said, if I turn out to have no imagination, I can steal things from the historical record, which actually works really well. And so that seems like an easier way to go about it, because you have the existing history, how hard could that be? And so I said, okay, historical fiction. What period, shall we set this? There's a lot of history, a lot of different locations. So, early Greece, late Egypt, moving on, American Civil War, Venice under the Borgias. These are all very picturesque, colorful things. But, you've got to wait for something to ring your bell, as it were. And in this frame of mind, I happened to see a really old Doctor Who rerun on public television one day. And this was one of the Patrick Troughton episodes, very old. For those who are not British and may not know, Doctor Who is a really old British television serial. It's been going on since 1950 something, I think. I was born in 1952, so I'll tell you. But anyway, luckily the Doctor reincarnates periodically. It's just how they keep it moving. But the Doctor is a Time Lord from the planet Gallifrey who travels through space and time having adventures. And along the way, he picks up companions from different periods of Earth's history. And so in this particular show, he had picked up, among other people, a young Scotsman from 1746. Mm-hmm. And this was a nice-looking young man who appeared in his kilt.
Yes.
And I was thinking, well, that's kind of fetching. Anyway, I found myself still thinking about this the next day in church. And I said, well, you want to write a book. It doesn't matter where you start. The important thing is pick a point and get going. Yeah. To find Scotland, 18th century. So that's where Outlander came from.
Thank goodness for Doctor Who.
And the man in the kilt.
And the man in the kilt. Well, we always can say thank goodness for a man in a kilt. What do you do to fuel your creativity outside of writing? So you mean your profession is writing. Do you have other ways of inspiring yourself or being creative?
That hadn't occurred to me that it was a job.
It's your career and your passion. I don't say it in job in like a bad way. I mean, the fact that
no. But I mean, that's, I just, basically the answer is I read books all the time. But, I being a scientist, I look at things. I'm very observant. And I have objectivity, which, is actually a fairly rare thing to have, but it helps. So anyway, on a given day, sometimes I will have no idea what I'm going to write. It's what I call a cold day. Nothing's happening, nothing. And on those occasions, I'll probably go to my bookshelves. I've got like 2,000 books over there, most of them about Scotland and assorted matters, botanical medicine, et cetera, et cetera. So I would go just pick up randomly one of my research books and start flipping through it, just idly, just running my eyes down things. If something occurs to me to look up, I'll say, oh, swords, I do have a thing about how to duel with a saber. Is anybody doing that? I don't see that. No, what's going on? So, I have a stack of old Sotheby's auction catalogs dealing with furniture and objects from the 18th century. So that's a help because I can see what things actually look like. So sometimes I'll flip through those and I'll just, for no reason, think, okay, I just need to write about something, to break my luck today. So, okay, here's this nice goblet, crystal goblet with Jacobite roses embedded in it. It is from the 18th century Waterford crystal. Okay, fine. So I set that in front of me in my mind's eye, and I'm sitting there looking at it, thinking, And as always, I'm saying, where is the light coming from? Where's the light falling? It's obviously falling on that goblet, because I can see it sparkling. So where's the light coming from? It's coming from my right. Okay, that light looks odd. It's not like regular. It's not regular light. Why is it odd? It has a blue tinge to it. Oh, I see. There's snow outside. This is the kind of light you get reflected off snow. All right. So okay, it's snowing outside, so it's cold. It's winter. Okay, the cold blue light of a winter afternoon. Is that right? Does it have to be a late afternoon? The sun is coming in at a very low angle, but then it's winter, it doesn't have to be that late. The cold blue light, it has to be cold and it has to be blue. I need both those things. All right, and it is light. Okay, we're good that far. All right, but is there anything else? The low light of a cold blue winter afternoon? No, that doesn't work. It has to be cold blue light in that order. I can see that. Okay, so the cold blue light of a late winter afternoon. Okay, I like the alliteration between light and late. That's okay. The cold blue light of a late winter afternoon came through the window. Well, of course, it came through the window. Where else is it going to get in? Okay, let's skip the window. We know the light is coming in. The cold blue light of a late winter afternoon. Do I really want light? Maybe I do. Maybe I don't. I can always take it out later. The cold blue light of a midwinter afternoon. That might work instead. Let me type that. No, I like late. The cold blue light of a late winter afternoon. passed through the crystal glass, because yes, crystal, of course, is going to pass through. And well, then what happened then? Well, obviously you see the light on the other side, passed through the light and fell. Does light fall? Well, I mean, of course it falls, sunlight, sunset, everything. Cold blue light of a late winter afternoon passed through the crystal goblet. Do I need to put in the roses? Not right here. Can do that later. Passed through the crystal glass, and I don't like the word fell. What else could it be doing? I mean, the light's over there. Well, I can see it. It's forming a puddle there on the table that the glass is standing on. Passed through the crystal goblet and cast a pool of amber light. I can see it's amber. Passed the pool of amber light. Well, it's on something, we should say that, on the polished wood tabletop. I can see it. It's polished wood. Okay, so the cold blue light of a late winter afternoon passed through the crystal goblet and cast a pool of amber light on the polished wood of the tabletop. Okay, now I know where I am. I'm in Jocasta Cameron's parlor, because she is the only person who would have a Stewart crystal glass full of whiskey. That's why the liquid is amber, is because the glass is full of whiskey.
Wow. Okay.
That's how I write.
That's amazing. I love the conversation that you're having with yourself as you're writing it, right?
All the time.
Real time. That's fantastic. Wow. And we're getting a lot of comments from people who, whoa, Margaret. Yes, Margaret. That's exactly how we all feel. Your fans, some applause, yes.
Oh,
You have very devoted fans. They get tattoos.
They're very nice.
Yeah, they're very lovely. They get tattoos based on Outlander. They make clothing. They, as I mentioned at the top,
they're very creative. Yeah,
characters. They join online communities and travel to Scotland. They make friendships based on your book, your books, and you engage with them. I see you when you today on Twitter, and you're asking people, "What do you think of the latest episode of the show?" And then you do something that I don't think I've ever really seen another author do, especially not an author of your success level. You share works, daily lines. You call them daily lines. You share your work in progress.
Yeah.
And that really feels unusual to me. It feels so, well, I guess I said earlier that your writing strikes me as open, and it feels very open and engaged. And how did you come to a place where you engage so much with your fans and you have constant dialogue with them? How did that come to be your approach? And then also, what do you get from it? Do you feel inspired by it, or is it a pressure to know people are so eagerly awaiting your next?
Well, no, they're just going to have to wait, You can't, if you're lucky enough to have more than one fan, it's impossible to satisfy everyone. So you just don't worry about it. You write the best book you can, and you let them make what they will of it. But no, this came about in part because of my two jobs and so forth. I mentioned writing software reviews.
Yes.
InfoWorld, which at the end of a year, I was making as much money doing that as I was at the university, which just goes to show how badly they pay biologists. But one day, Byte magazine, I think it was, sent me a floppy disk. I can show you how old it is.
Yes, I remember floppy disk.
Floppy disk, yeah. Sent me a floppy disk for the software that they wanted me to be reviewing, and also another little floppy disk in a nice envelope that was a trial membership to CompuServe. As I said, before the internet. But are you old enough actually to have heard of CompuServe?
No, I am. Yes, I know.
That's pretty good. Yeah, well, back in the day, we had, there was DARPANet, which was the U.S. military. But then we had CompuServe, Genie, and Delphi, which were the three information services, as they were called. And each one of these had like special interest groups, or fora, as they called them, dedicated to people who were interested in old cars or gardening or military matters, or in this case, books and writing. Okay, well, Byte said, we would like you to take up this trial membership, go on CompuServe, and look for the support forum that goes with this software you're reviewing. Because, having online support is just the sexiest thing anybody's ever heard of. And so they want you to mention it in your review. I said, great, fine. So I did that, looked it up. Yeah, sure, there it was. It worked in a very crude and rudimentary fashion, but it was really the only game in town. And so I wrote my review and all that. But I said, well, this was a 5-hour trial membership, and this was when they charged you $30 an hour to be connected. And I said, okay, I'm not going to waste $120. What else is in here? And so I started poking around, and I ran into the literary forum. This was a bunch of people who were just interested in books and writing.
Yeah.
There were a number of writers in every stage of career development, to very big bestsellers, down to people who were just struggling to get their feet wet. And there were also a lot of people who didn't write but liked to talk to writers and talk about books and social problems. Anyway, it was like a 24-hour literary cocktail party. And for someone with 3 small children and 2 full-time jobs, it was the ideal social life. So, I would log on there every night. I got automatic software, so I didn't go broke doing it. But I would log on that night and periodically, pick up messages or, read through other people's messages, reply, ask, carry on conversation. It was just like, a water cooler break.
Right.
Where you're talking to friends. Okay, so I was not going to tell anyone what I was doing when I began writing a book for practice, even my husband. And I was not going to tell these people either. But I'd been at it maybe 6 months or so. And I found myself one night, logging on and having conversations. And I was talking to this one gentleman and was having an argument about what it feels like to be pregnant. And he said, "Oh, I know what that's like. My wife said 3 children." And I laughed. And I said, "Yeah, Buster, I've had 3 children." And he said, "Well, can you tell me what it's like?" I said, "I can, yes. But it's kind of complex. I don't know that I could put it in a 30-line message slot," which is what we had. I said, "I have this little scene that I wrote a few months ago in which a young woman explains to her brother in some detail what it's like to be pregnant." I said, "I'll put that in the library here and you can read it." So I did. And everyone who had been following the argument went and read the piece. They all came rushing back and they said, "Well, this is great. What is it?" And I said, "I have no idea." And I said, "Well, we love these people. Do you have more of this?" And I said, "Well, yeah, it's not, contiguous, but I have more." They said, "Well, put it up. We want to see this." And, to have someone actually express not only pleasure in your writing, but a desire to see more of it. This is like heroin. I mean, absolutely, you want to do it again. So that's where I started putting up daily lines.
So you've always, from the very beginning,
always done that.
Always. So it's part of, and then, okay, so that scene, was that Jenny explaining to Jamie when it's like,
That's right.
Outlander?
Mm-hmm. That's it.
Book,
Mm-hmm.
book
Yeah.
one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right, great. So I'm very happy with myself that I knew that reference. Okay, I have more questions, of course, but we have some audience questions and people have been waiting patiently.
Of course.
So, I want to just remind the audience that we're including links below to purchase Diana's books. And we've included links to the Poison Pen, Diana. I know that that's your local indie.
Local independent, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and that you signed many, many books for them. I had my copy signed of these, and they deliver anywhere in the world. So that's below. Mm-hmm. And we had a lovely time interviewing Barbara Peters. She came to the Blaze.
She's great.
She's wonderful. So we'll include the link to that interview with Barbara. She's the owner of the Poison Pen. We'll put that below. Okay. That's so audience questions. So, Joanna. Hi, Joanna. Joanna wants to know might there be more in the Lord John Grey arena? More books, perhaps?
Yes, if you mean books dedicated to Lord John. Yes, it's about number 4 on my list of things I am working on. But yes, there's a book called The Black Chamber, which is to deal with his adventures with British intelligence.
Excellent. Okay. We have another Lord John question, actually. This one's from Margaret. Margaret wants to know if there's a difference between your Outlander fans and your Lord John series fans, or are they one and the same? Do you find people come to you for Lord John Grey independently of Outlander, or are they maybe the same?
Sometimes they do, but sometimes some people have a knee-jerk reaction to a very large book and they're like, "Oh, I can't read that," but they've been recommended to read my books, and so they see a Lord John book and think, "Oh, I can deal with that." And so they'll start there, and frequently they get hooked and eventually end up with the big books. And sometimes people read the big books and they fall in love with Lord John, and learning that he has his own series, they want to go and see it. But it's hit or miss. A lot of people are just, "I'm only in it for Jamie and Claire. I don't care about this gay guy." And other people are going, "Oh, poor Lord John, we adore him. He's so witty. We do adore him." Yeah. Exactly, we do. Yeah. Wonderful. So as I say, nobody ever reads the same book as another person. So people are entitled to be attracted to whatever they're attracted to.
Absolutely. Mark wants to know, in a normal writing workday, how many words do you write, or do you measure your progress in a different way?
No, I measure it that way. I aim for 1,000 words a day, and I aim to do that 5 days a week. I will officially take one day off, and then there's always friction, and you lose another day somewhere along the way. But I will aim for 1,000 words a day. Sometimes I'm left alone, and it goes faster, and I know what I'm doing, and I might get as much as 3 or 4,000 words in one day. Occasionally, if I reach a certain point in the book where I really need to be left alone and work, I go up to my old family house in Flagstaff, Arizona, and I've never gone for more than 3 days, but I will just sit there and, write. And I get up to, take a walk or make food and stuff like that. And, I always take an evening break and watch television for 2 hours to clear my mind. But basically, I do nothing else but write. And so I will get, several thousand words a day when I do that. I think the most I've written in one day was 7,000, but that was nonfiction, which is much easier.
We also received some questions in advance. And so here's one that came to us that said, would you ever consider writing a standalone book about Blackjack Randall?
Well, that's an interesting idea, but it's not one that resonates with me at the moment. So I don't know. I don't think so. On the other hand, I am or will be writing a standalone book about Frank Randall called What Frank Knew.
Yay! Everyone on Team Frank is excited about that one. Wonderful.
Everybody else is saying, no, we only want to read
No, we love them all. We love them all. Here's another audience question. Of all your books, which one has your favorite ending and your favorite beginning?
Ooh, my favorite beginning is probably Voyager, which opens with the immortal line, "He was dead."
Yes.
However, his nose throbbed painfully, which he thought unusual in the circumstances. That's right. Yeah, it's about my favorite beginning. It actually won an award from EW magazine for best first line.
What about favorite ending?
Yeah. Oh, let's see. I think it's probably "Hello, the House" from the one. Yes, that one written in
This is my favorite ending.
Yeah.
Cried like a baby. Like cried so much I woke my head. It was like 2:00 in the morning. I'm sobbing. I woke my husband up. Oh yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Though my second favorite is the ending of Bees, which is, "Sir, I need your help."
Yes.
Like I say, when I stimulate people with what happens next, that's when you use that kind of an ending.
Okay, so one more audience question. I love Fergus and Marsley. Will we get more of them in book 10?
I think so. I have not done a whole lot with them at the moment because I'm not sure where they are physically located. But they were right in the thick of the American Revolution, and being a printer meant, being literally on the firing line and so forth. So we saw a little bit of the difficulties that they have in Bees. At the same time, we're dealing with a lot of very major characters, and so I have to balance this and that. So usually we will only see Fergus and Marcelly when one of the more major characters comes in contact with them. But then again, there's always letters. I love to scatter letters through my book, so we may well hear from them, epistolarically, if that's a word.
Yes, I think it is. Great, thank you for answering those audience questions.
Sure,
you mentioned that one of the things you love to do is read, and that's what
all the time.
The best advice we can give to a writer is to read. What's on your bedside table now? What are you reading, or what are you looking forward to reading next?
Oh, let's see. I'm reading one of P.D. James's mysteries that I had not got to called The Lighthouse, and that's always very absorbing. But I literally have, TBR does not even begin to describe it. I am looking at 4 stacks of books over there, which have roughly 20 volumes to a stack, and that is, my on-hand reading.
Yes.
As in, if I'm going somewhere in a plane or something, I love to read tactile books on planes because nobody bothers you. You just and enjoy them. But the rest of the time, I'm usually running around with a Kindle or an iPad under my arm, and reading wherever I am. So that's a different set. And then there are the bathroom shelves downstairs, which is the overflow from up here. And that's, another 200 books on my to be read. And anyway, it goes on from there.
Yeah.
So, I have never read a book I didn't like.
I love that. I never read a book I never liked. Well, it's so many books, too little time. I think we all suffer from that.
Absolutely.
So your Outlander books have had a sizable impact on tourism in Scotland. You've actually won awards for this impact. And I understand that you're heading to Scotland this summer. or
Yes.
soon.
Mhm.
What's your favorite thing to do if you were going to advise someone who's planning a trip to Scotland? What would you say is Diana Gabaldon's like, you must do this? Is it go to Culloden? Is it have coffee in Edinburgh somewhere? Like, what would you recommend as a must do when people go?
Well, for me and my husband, it's to have a bottle of champagne and French fries at the Balmoral Hotel bar. But that's a very idiosyncratic preference. Not everybody would want to do that.
A great combination.
Yeah.
Champagne,
Mhm.
French fries.
French fries, yes, with both ketchup and mayonnaise in the
Perfect.
European South. Yeah. Oh, best snack ever. But yeah, if you're being a tourist and so forth, I would go to Inverness and visit not only Culloden but a number of the other landmarks around there. I mean, this is real Fraser territory.
Yes.
In fact, I just got a message from the Clan Fraser organization saying that Castle Beaufort, which was the most modern and most recent Fraser castle, which they had been forced to give up after the two previous Frasers were killed and died in close succession. And then the youngest Fraser didn't have any money to pay all of the death duties and so forth, and was forced to sell his castle, which of course all of the Frasers felt very bad about. Anyway, it is now back on the market, and so they're just advertising it just in case they run into anybody very wealthy who would like a nice castle.
Were they inviting you to buy it?
No, they specifically said, we're not suggesting that you buy this. We just thought you might be interested in hearing about it. I was going, well, that's good because,
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention one of my other favorite books you've written, which is I Give You My Body.
Oh, good. I'm glad you read that.
Yeah, and that's well, it's not a novella because it's nonfiction, but it's a book. It's a short book that you've written about how to write sex scenes. Because
that's right.
I mean, it's an established fact that you write very successful sex scenes.
Why, thank you.
They're good, and it's a great resource for writers who are struggling with how do I approach writing a sex scene, because that can be very intimidating.
Well, it can, but the basic key thing to writing a sex scene is to realize that a sex scene is about the exchange of emotions, not bodily fluids.
Yes. And then the other thing you say that's really valuable is a sex scene isn't always about sex. It's usually about something else.
That's right.
Yes. And can you say, so that's actually another really great piece of advice from that. And then the other thing I love is the rule of three. Can you explain what that is?
Oh, yeah. Well, I got that one from Gustave Flaubert, in fact, so I'm sure other people have noticed it. But that has to do with sensory detail. Technically, we've got 5 senses, sometimes 6. But normally people, especially when they're beginning writers, they only use sight and sound. She saw this, she heard that, saw this, I heard that, and so forth, which is reasonable, but that leaves your writing a little bit flat. And our friend Gustave noticed that if you used 3 of the senses in a given scene, suddenly it was much more dimensional, much more approachable. And so if you use, say, smell in addition to those, you're going to get a much more immersive experience, which is one of the reasons why Claire smells things all the time.
So definitely, to our audience, please check out that book if you haven't already. It's also, if you're not a writer, it's still a great resource because it might help you understand why you read a book and you get to the sex scene and you think, oh, this isn't working for me. Why not? And this book will help you understand that. Well, we're coming to the end of our time, which, while it breaks my heart, I must let you go so you go off into the world to continue writing.
Yes, I do have a few other things to do.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, she who has written books with a time travel storyline, if I didn't ask you a time travel question. So if you could go back in time and talk to the version of yourself that was on CompuServe writing these early scenes that became Outlander, what advice would you give yourself? What would you tell yourself about your writing career, about the books yet to come? Is there any piece of wisdom that you would pass down that would be helpful?
Oh, no, I don't think I know anything, in terms of, self-stimulation or whatever, that I didn't know then. Because as I say, I was a scientist. I've been writing stuff, for years and years, including Walt Disney comic books and so forth. So, I had no fear of the written word as such. Many people do, and reasonably enough, they aren't used to handling language. I was, and yeah, it was just, how do I approach this particular thing? I have not written fiction, but, I've been telling stories to my younger sister for years and years and things like that. And I've been reading stories forever. Surely if I write a novel, I will know how. So no, I don't think I would actually have any advice. I don't know any more now than I did then. You need to put words on the page is basically it. Anything that lets you do that is the right thing to do.
It's the right thing to do. That's great. Diana, thank you so much for being with us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
This is wonderful conversation. We're so grateful for the opportunity to talk with you about Outlander, to talk with you about your writing process. And again, to our audience, please go check out, if you haven't read every one of the Outlander books, I'm not sure why that is, please go read them. Links below.
Take your time.
It will take a little bit of time to read them all. And again, links to the Poison Pen below. Also to our audience, if you liked today's show, and we certainly hope that you did, please subscribe to A Mighty Blaze on Facebook to get notified about all of our events, or hop over to our website, amightyblaze.com, to sign up for our newsletter. We'll be back next week with more interviews, with conversations with authors whose books we love so much, like Diana's. Thank you all for being with us. Thank you, Diana. And
thank you. It's been a great pleasure talking to you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Be well, everyone, and keep reading.
Thank you.